Hey everybody, it's Mason here with 716 Outdoors. On today's episode, we're going to be interviewing my father, Chris Hamilton. He's going to tell us a little bit about the history of Market Katie Sugar House that's been featured in our other episodes. I think you guys ought to stick around because this is going to be a great episode. Do you want to tell us the history of the sugar house?
Well, according to my poor old pa, that was a garage for either Model A or Model T in Black Creek, and it had been moved up to the farm before they bought it. And pa, mom, dad bought the property in the spring. I think it was in May. And then the following year, Dad was able to get some buckets, and they tapped a few trees and made some syrup. They used a front end off a bobsled and milk cans and gathered and with a pony. If they had been a circus. And well, Pa bought a used evaporator over in Friendship. I can't remember how many buckets they got with them. It comes to mind it was maybe like 35. And he got an 8N Ford tractor, and we used that for years together, sat. But been making it on the farm ever since. So, and the old sugar house, I mean, over the years, I mean, it was pretty rough with dirt floor and holes in the roof, which it was pretty on a sunny morning when the sun come over the horizon and you're boiling and watching to see the sunbeams go through the steam. It's pretty.
It was pretty neat.
So, but then Pa always wanted to have a new sugar house, and we had gotten some stuff around and we were going to, and then after he retired he had a heart attack and open heart surgery and everything, and we just got to the point where we didn't want to tear it down, so we resurrected it, firmed everything up, eventually put a metal roof on it. And well, the first evaporator we had, I can't remember how many years we used that, but then when he retired, he got parts off his old machine at work at the tile plant, and we built another evaporator. And by that time in history, the Amish had a tin shop down in Black Creek, and Pa was good friends with them, and they built us stainless pans. So I pretty much built that evaporator, and we used that for 25 years until it kind of burned out on the inside. And then when we decided to take that one out, because it was just too much to redo it every year, we ended up pulling everything out of there and had a friend come up with a excavator and dug it out, and we ran concrete, put an addition on for wood room, and the Amish built us another evaporator, and just the sugar house itself has been a work in progress for almost 70 years. So we've got on our labels and stuff that we started in 1957, but after seeing some videos that my dad made with Jim Kimball I believe it actually started in '55, but we're committed on all our stickers and everything to our labeling to '57 now, so that's where it lives. But I actually think it was a couple years before that. So we still do it traditional way. We hang buckets on the trees and gather the buckets. We don't run any RO. We don't run any pipeline. We do everything the traditional way. My father taught me. Try to pass that on to the boys. They can both make syrup. Grandsons can. Nick can sit down in the evaporator if you get him around here, and can make syrup. So keep passing it on. Well, there was questions about how we determine when it's syrup. You can tell by how it boils when you're getting close, and then we start measuring it. We use a hydrometer, and this is a hydrometer cup. You pour the hot syrup in there, and when it gets up to syrup, it'll start to float. And this is actually on a Brix scale, BRIX, and it'll do a hot check and a cold check. Make sure it actually runs on the density. You can make syrup with like a candy thermometer, but the temperature changes where water boils at, depending on the ambient temperature and your barometric pressure and all that stuff. You have to keep check on. My pocket makes syrup even without that. When it gets close to syrup, you take the dipper and you pull it out, and you'll see it start to flake right off there. They call it wafering. My pa always called it shitting off the dipper. He could determine closer that way than I could by measuring it with the Brix on the hydrometer. But my dad was a special breed when it come to that. Sometimes we get a little over. We like thick syrup here. We don't cut it short like your major producers do. I'm more about quality than quantity. But if you get a little bit over, then it'll crystallize in the bottom of the jar, which we do have that happen occasionally. But as far as when it comes to flavor, I haven't had too many people complain about ours.
So how do you get it to sugar?
To sugar, then you take a candy thermometer and you boil it on. Syrup is actually 7 degrees over what water boils at. Normally water boils at 212, 219 is syrup. Well, take it on up to make sugar and cream. You use a candy thermometer. This is the one I happen to have handy here. And my sister's the one that makes the sugar and cream, but it's got to go up around, according to this, like maybe 234 or something like that. But once you get it up to the proper temperature, then for cream, you chill it. And once that's chilled, then you run it through a beater and beat it, and it'll thicken up and make cream. You can make soft sugar, which I've seen my poor old pa boil it up, and he'll put it in the dish, and they just take a spoon and stir it, and it'll congeal into soft sugar. And then you take it on up past that, which I'm not even sure what the temperatures are, because that's not my forte. I do the grunt work to make sugar, and then it'll harden up. Which I've been told in the old days, they didn't really make syrup for the sake of syrup itself. That there wasn't sugar to be had like there is cane sugar these days and everything, which they would boil everything on down and make sugar, and then once you get sugar made, then they would pound it up and kind of crystallize it, and they would use that for their sweetening. You know, Pa used to tell about whenever he made cream or sugar or everything, he always called that sugaring off. And when they'd sugar off, one of their neighbors would come over, and he was so sugar starved, he told how many soup bowls, it was like 5 or 6 soup bowls of soft sugar he would sit there and eat all at once. Well, I've seen my sister bring down sugar and cream, and she'd sit there and eat sugar until it gave her the bellyache. She probably wouldn't be proud of that, but it happened. And back years ago when we had the old flat pans, the original setup, a lot of times there wasn't enough syrup in the pan to actually take it to syrup, so my dad would pull it early, and then he would bring it in and finish it on the stove. Well, when it boils to syrup, it'll rise right up in the pan. Well, he wasn't paying very close attention one time and run it over on the stove, and he got that all cleaned up. And the next morning, my mom come out to make coffee. Well, apparently he didn't clean the floor, and she stepped in cold syrup on the floor the first thing in the morning. Didn't start her day out right.
I can imagine.
So, but then she was cleaning it up with some paper towel, and my dad was headed to work and made some smart remark, and she threw the paper towels at him so hard she broke the kitchen window. And then, of course, my brother, knowing enough to keep his mouth shut, came home from work that night, walked in, he goes, "It's cold in here." And it kind of started everything over again. Well, my dad, when we syrup is done, then when you filter it out, get some of the impurities, and then there is a compound that occurs naturally in it. It's called niter, commonly called sugar sand. He used these old filters that look like a felt hat. And then after we upgraded our operation, we had the Amish build a jugging station, which we can use flat filters, and you take the hot syrup off, pour it in there, it comes out hot, and we can jug it right there. My dad was never real fancy on his jugging processes. Most of the stuff we had at home was done in mason jars, which actually is probably the best way to do it, because we found syrup in there 5 or 6 years old or more, and you crack the lid on that and break the seal, and it smelled just like you took it off yesterday. Some of our jarring processes, we've got fancy glass. My sister started making up labels and ordering labels. We have a whole variety of those now. We had old style tin ones, which weren't able to get this year. Since the COVID stuff has gone on, we've had difficulties getting different ones. A couple of years ago, we couldn't get any plastic, so we had to use metal cans. Now this year, we can't get any. We couldn't get any cans. Everything was plastic or glass. So, well, my dad, if somebody had an old whiskey bottle that was empty, he'd wash it out and he'd put syrup in a whiskey bottle and give it to somebody. He never sold a lot of it. I mean, when I was a kid, we used to make a certain amount. Anything that was good syrup, primarily he sold to help pay the taxes. The later darker syrup we always had for home. But he enjoyed making it and giving it away. He was happier giving it away than he was selling it. And I think that's kind of where our tradition goes. We don't make it to sell. If we did, we'd do it different. We barter with it. Last year when eggs were $5 a dozen, I traded a quart of syrup to one of the neighbors for 5 dozen eggs, which was a pretty good deal. And when we ran low on eggs, I got a hold of him again. He goes, "Geez, that syrup was so good." He goes, "I gave you 6 dozen this time." So, but the process has changed a lot over the years, over the last 70 years. But the end result hopefully is the same. A lot of difference in the sugar house. with the concrete floor and new evaporator, and we've added on a wood room, which my dad would never have wood ahead for sugar. And there's times we boiled with green thorn brush. And one year, my brother and I thought we'd be real smart. Dad didn't like to burn white oak in the house in the wood stove. So we went and cut a whole bunch of white oak, put it in the sugar house, and had it all stocked up for the next year, ready to go sugaring. Well, that spring, we opened up the sugar house to get ready to tap, and all that wood we cut it long enough, wouldn't fit in the stove, but we went out there was a bunch of sawdust and a bunch of little nubbins. He'd gone out with a chainsaw and cut them all off and used them in the house. But in those years, we burnt a lot of trash wood. We burnt pallets, we burnt whatever we could burn. I mean, within reason. I mean, you can't burn certain things because it'll taint your syrup, but we burn a lot of scrap wood, burn a lot of edgings from the sawmills, burn a lot of slab wood from the sawmills.
A lot of pallets.
Yeah, a lot of pallets. And back with the old evaporator, you get some good dry pallets going in there and go out and look, and you can see 10 feet of flame shooting out the top of that smokestack, which we've gone through a couple generations. The original smokestack we had there was the liners out of two hot water tanks that were welded together. They split apart, and we patched them back together, and then they come apart again. There wasn't really much fixed to it. We got a metal one from the neighbors and didn't like how that worked. And then the Amish built a stainless that I used 1 year, but that got so hot we set the sugar house on fire. And then a friend of the family had some double wall, and when we did the new roof and everything, he gave me the double wall, so we put that up, and that's lasted pretty good for a number of years now.
How much wood would you say we went through this year?
I don't know. I don't measure it out. I put 3 rows of wood in the sugar house. Normally, when I tap at the beginning of the year, my goal is to make 30 gallons. And we hadn't made 30 gallon in over 18 years. And then last year, we got a bit of an early run, and
a heavy run.
Yeah, a heavy run. When I get a good run on my sugar bush, I'll get 2 gathering tanks of sap. If I have a good run, I'll get 3. If I have an exceptional run, I'll get 4. The first run last year, it was 7 tanks before I got everything out of the buckets the first time. By the time I got everything done, I should have been gathering again. We ended up making 52 gallons last year, which that's uncharted territory. We've never made anything like that before. And I could have made more than that, but I ran out of wood. At the end of the season, I didn't have enough wood to even bring it back to a boil again. And the buckets trees were still running when I turned the buckets. I ended up gathering 3 more tankfuls that I gave to the Amish neighbors that made our equipment. And they were still running. I mean, we could have kept going. But help was in short supply. Wood was in short supply.
The ambition was
ambition. By that time, ambition was in short supply. But this year we tapped even earlier, and we were just shy of 40 gallons and had only been on it a month and shut everything down. Weather had been so odd, a lot of my smaller trees had quit running. The day that I pulled the taps, out of 65 or 70 that I pulled to begin with, probably wasn't a dozen of them that would actually say we're running. Some of them were dripping just the least little bit, but a lot of them are just dry and had quit. But with the cold snap we got here, we can tap again, but we have a sufficient amount for us, and I don't like to stress my trees like that. Well, our sugar bush here on the farm is on the north-facing slope, which means they don't get the sun as early as other trees, and so they run later in the day and run later in the season. Uh, Normally, for sap to run good, it's got to go below freezing at night, and then warm up during the day with some decent sunshine. Uh, with our trees being on the north-facing slope, if it gets down below 27, 26 degrees, normally it doesn't get warm enough during the day for them to run much. They'll run a little on the sunny side of the tree, but you don't get a good run. The sap, depending on how sweet your sap is, on how much it takes to make a gallon of syrup, and that all varies. And also, I mean, if it's cold out and you've got ice in the buckets, you're throwing, we throw the ice out, which that's naturally going to make your sap sweeter. I don't check the bricks on the sweetness. I don't care. That it takes what it takes. And as far as how much wood we use, I never did measure up to find out how many cord we actually have, but we do use quite a variety of wood when we boil. This last year, there was white oak, maple, ash, ironwood, cherry, apple, elm, which dead elm that's good and dry is good wood to boil with. I mean, it doesn't leave you a lot of ash, but boy, it'll make it boil. Yeah, we have a lot of fun when we're boiling. I mean, there's hours and hours of sitting around, but keeps you busy. We like to make hot dogs and eggs and like that. I mean, the hot dogs, I'll take a kettle and we'll put stuff that's getting closer to syrup so it's nice and sweet, and put that in the kettle. Then we put the hot dogs in that, set that in the back pan. If you just dump them in there, one thing, it affects your taste. Another thing, the fat content coming out of there, and they won't boil. But we've done eggs and sausage and hot dogs, and my dad always talked about doing chicken. So my brother went out and got a chicken, and they dressed it out and they put it in there and cooked it. And geez, when they got done, Pa sat there and ate it like he had a delicacy. My brother said, just tastes like old boiled chicken. Everybody likes the hot dogs. It shows up to have a hot dog in the sap.
Yep, sappy wieners.
Yep, sappy wieners. Another question that comes up too about tapping the trees. My pa taught me that you don't just walk up and poke a hole. You look at where the sun hits the tree. You look at where your big feeder branches are, and you look at the roots where they come out, where the feeder roots come out. And if you can tap on the feeder roots that go up to the big branches, you'll get better runs. Now, granted, you can't tap the same places over and over. Another question that comes up when you pull the taps, you don't want to plug that hole off. You want it to heal naturally. If you put stuff in there to try to plug it up, that can cause bacteria, cause rot, and you can actually kill a tree doing that. And another thing that my pa talked about too was not tapping too heavy. We see a lot of places where, they'll have good sized trees and they'll just hang, 4, 5, 6 buckets on it. And they do that for a number of years. They actually girdle that tree and they'll kill it. Or my pa taught me to be cautious on how many buckets you actually hang per tree. And you can't tap too close to the old ones, the old tap marks. We try to be careful what we're doing. And actually on the farm, a lot of the older trees that my pa tapped years ago, some of them had died off. Some of them just plain quit running. I think if we actually cut down some of them, we probably find that they're hollow inside. But one example, up on the ridge up here, there's a good sized tree there. My dad used to hang 3 buckets on it, and that's the only buckets that we hung on that ridge. Well, those trees have grown in the last 60 some years, and I actually hang 25 buckets up there now. So that's where we're making up the difference in some of the bigger trees that don't run.
All right, that's going to wrap up this episode. If you guys have any more questions about how things work or things that you've seen in any of our episodes, with the sugar house, then please feel free to comment down below. It's been great, finally getting to, tell the story and share a little bit of the history. It's been in the family for a lot of years. So, getting to, share this information and the story with everybody it's great. So, like I said, if you have any more questions, let us know. And if we get enough questions, then we'll do a follow-up episode.
My wife and I live all alone in a little brown hut we call our own. Wife loves tea and I love rum. Tell you boys, don't we have fun? Ha ha ha, you and me. Little brown jug.